Using purchased molds is a great way to quickly make very consistent polymer clay pieces. However, sometimes we don't want our results to be so predictable and to look so much like anybody else's. In today's video, I have even more ideas for how you can customize polymer clay bezel molds. So in a previous video, I showed you how to use this Scalpey bezel mold, which is a match for the cabochon mold. And I showed you several ways that you could press your clay into this mold, demold it, and then sculpt it and make it custom. But it occurred to me while I was doing that, and I kind of mentioned it towards the end of the video, that what about baking your pieces right in the mold so that they are perfectly shaped, and then adding decoration to them this way. So now you have your perfect molded bezel shape, but then you can add things to it. And I started playing and experimenting and came up with several different ideas that I hope you will use as jumping off points for decorating your own. This is one that I alluded to and kind of showed in the previous video, which is just to make polymer clay beading. I showed one way of measuring your clay for the beads last time, but another way of doing that is just to roll out your clay on whatever setting. This happens to be the thinnest setting of my pasta machine, and then use a cutter to cut out pieces. And now you know that every single one of those pieces is the exact same size, and so you can get your perfect little pearls or beads. The best way I've found to make them perfectly round is to actually roll them in the palm of my hand. You want to be sure to apply a little bit of liquid polymer clay to the edge of your baked bezel so that your unbaked clay will stick. And then you can just go ahead and add these. The nice thing about having the baked bezel is that you can use that hard edge, and I kind of end up using my fingernails a lot here to just press up against that and get your rows nice and even. Then I started experimenting with an extruder, and I found all kinds of fun things that you could do. First of all, I used this extruder. This is from my Czech extruder, and it extrudes these little triangle shapes. You can then use your clay blade to cut them into as evenly sized slices as you can, and I found all sorts of different ways that you can arrange these on your bezels. One thing is just to put them pointy side out. And again, I kind of used my fingernail. You could also use your blade, and that helps you to get that nice even edge. And just pick these up and apply them. And again, in all of these, I won't repeat it in all of them, but do make sure and put a thin line of liquid clay on all of your baked clay surfaces. So what's interesting is here's one look with the points facing out. And here's a completely different look with the points facing in. And in this case, because the points are overlapping the inside edge of the bezel a bit, I actually put my cabochon in first. And notice that in all of the examples I've shown you so far, I didn't match the color of my decoration to the color of the baked bezel. So some of the contrast is nice. But this is a really cool look and very different from the points facing in. Or if you don't want to decide, then don't, and have them facing in and out, and you get almost the look of a mosaic. I just used a tool as I was placing these. This is a little gum stimulator that I attached to a polymer handle with some epoxy sculpt, because these will melt if you put them in the oven. So air dry clay is good for that. And then I can just use this to position these so that I had a somewhat consistent grout line. And in this case, you'll have to decide where you want your pieces to line up, on the inside edge or the outside edge. One extruded die, 3 different looks, and this one would be fun to fill in after baking. Perhaps fill in with some liquid polymer clay in a different color to make it look like grout lines. So it looks like you've got a little mosaic on top of your bezel there. And here's a tip for you when you're experimenting, is just pick a couple of techniques and stick with those. So for me, it was rolled balls and extrusions. And I picked just a few extruder plates and started playing with what I had. So there's this one. So this one extrudes this shape. And then you can see here I cut it into slices. Now my first thought had been to leave the slices whole and have them sticking out. But it seemed a bit much. Maybe it could be used in other applications. You could overlap them like feathers or such. But what I actually ended up doing was I cut right down the middle so that I had a flat edge, and then started placing these on my shape. And again, kind of used the fingernail to get those all straight against that hard edge. And also just use the back of the blade to make a little indent in each of those. So again, it sort of looks like leaves or feathers. And like the triangle one, this is another one that you can play and explore and experiment with. I really wanted to take the time to start putting these, like I said, whole instead of cut in half, but sort of like a feather border. There's just so many ideas that really, you could limit yourself to one die, cut out a strip like this, and then challenge yourself to try to make half a dozen or 10 different ways of using just that one thing. The final die I used was this one, which is just a little tiny 1 millimeter round die, which I use for a lot of different things in my work. It just gives you this perfect little tiny rope that you can use as a decoration. In this case, I just wrapped it around and around and around. Again, putting TLS on the edges. I kind of thinned the end, tapered it down a bit, and then just started wrapping. And then at the end I also thinned it down quite a bit so that it would taper nicely. And that's a cool look, and this one would really look fun with some patinas, some antiquing in there. Another thing I did was I combined the ideas. So this one's been baked. First I baked the bezel, and then I made these little dots. These dots were made the same way as these ones were, except that I cut each of these circles in half to get, you can see these balls are half the size of those, to get little balls that are just a little bit smaller. But then I thought it would be fun to take my little tiny spaghetti die, whatever you want to call it. And this was much easier to do once you've gone ahead and baked the balls and have them on there. Because then, isn't that fun? You can just wrap this around and then decide, I think I want it on the outside of the outer corners. Whoop. This was difficult to do without pre-baking the little dots. Having them pre-baked really gives you a firm place to wrap your clay extrusion. And isn't that just a cool look? A filigree, kind of zigzaggy. Oh, you get the idea. And this one I really love the look of. It's kind of rustic and shaggy, and all I did was I took, again, bits of this 1 millimeter extrusion, kind of just lightly tap them against each other, and trim off the ragged edge. And a tip for you when doing this is don't make this section too long, because you're going to be trying to shape it around a round piece, and if it's too long it's just really difficult. Cut off a section, pop it on here, which has some TLS on it. And kind of embrace it when it all falls apart and gets all messy. I do not try to make this perfect. For me, part of the beauty of it is that it isn't. They're all kind of overlapping. They're not all exactly the same length. This clay's been sitting over the weekend. I'm recording this on a Monday, and I planned this like on Thursday or Friday, so it's a little bit difficult to manage. If your clay was freshly conditioned, it would be more sticky, and those pieces actually stuck together much better for me when I did this. But you get the idea. You just put these little bits from just a simple extruded strand, you have a great design. And like I said, just if you want to play and experiment, really pick 1 or 2 things to play with, and then challenge yourself to how many different ways can you put these together? And even as I'm looking at this right now and it's all this kind of spaghetti pile, and I'm thinking, well, wouldn't that be fun to just press that onto the edges of the bezel and trim off the excess and have this very random look. So by limiting yourself, you really find yourself exploring new and different ways of doing things. So I hope this has given you some ideas for taking just a plain, kind of boring baked bezel and turning it into something really fun and unique, especially if you add paints and patinas afterwards. If you're interested in the supplies I used, you should click on the link in the upper right of the video or the lower left at the end or the description box. All of those will lead you to my blog post where I have a complete supply list with links to products. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you'd like to get bonus tutorials, check out my Patreon page for how you can do that in return for helping support this channel.